Shalom, Gabe Greenberg here, Rabbi of Congregation Beth Israel in New Orleans, Louisiana, learning with you this week, as we do every week, the commentary of the Netziv on the weekly Torah portion. This week is Parsha Tetzaveh, but it is also the special Shabbat, known as Shabbat Zachor, wherein we read the reminiscence of what Amalek did to the Israelites, how they attacked the Israelites as they were leaving Egypt. And so we are going to look today at the Maftir reading for Shabbat Zachor, which is taken from Deuteronomy chapter 25. Now, what's interesting here is that right before the Parsha, the paragraph of Amalek, the previous paragraph is discussing the prohibition on using faulty weights and measurements in business dealings. Specifically, you have weights and you have a heavier one or a lighter one. So when you're doing a deal, you would surreptitiously put the heavier one or the lighter one on the scale to get a better deal, to get more money from the person you're doing business with. So the question is, why is it that right before we have the reminiscence of Amalek, that we have this discussion of faulty weights and measurements? It seems like they don't necessarily have that much to do with one another. So classically, Rashi, the great commentator, citing the Midrash, he also notes this and says, Im shikarta b'midot uv'mishkalot, if you lie regarding weights and measurements, have doeg migruye ha'oyev, you are going to fear the coming of the enemy. So he says, and he quotes a couple of verses as to why that's true. Basically, Rashi's answer is, Amalek came or will come in the future when you have unethical business dealings. The Netziv does not like that answer because he says this makes it seem that Amalek came back in the book of Exodus because the Israelites had faulty business practices, specifically regarding weights and measurements. V'hu pella, he says, this doesn't make any sense. Shahare lo haya b'midbar mischor sheyehe behem midot v'mishkalot. In the desert, the Israelites did not have access to weights and measurements in their business dealings. That's not the kind of business that they were doing. So how can you say that Amalek came back then because of faulty weights? Doesn't make sense. So he gives another answer, another type of answer, and it relates to a Talmudic discussion in tractate Bava Batra, Daf Peichet Amud Beit, where it says there, the sages say that the sin of faulty weights and measurements are chamor, are more stringent, yoter megilui arayot, that in fact they're worse than the sin of gilui arayos, the improper sexual relationships listed in the Torah, which is a very wild idea because normally we understand the prohibition of gilui arayos to be one of the three most stringent and problematic sins in the whole Torah, the other two being worshiping foreign gods, avodah zarah, and murder, shvichut damim. So those are the big three. Those are very bad, clearly. And how can the sages there seem to say that faulty weights and measures sort of rank in the same category as those three? So the Netziv uses this now to develop a broader idea, which is very interesting. And he says that whenever a person sins, they're sinning in one of three ways. O meheder ha'amuna b'Hashem u'v'Torato, you're either sinning because you have a lack or a hiddenness of faith in God and God's Torah. That's number one. Number two, you're sinning mitzad hitgavrus hataiva. You're sinning because you're just your desires and inclinations, specifically probably your bodily desires, have gotten the best of you. Or thirdly, mitzad hitgavrus hakas shenogos lebein adam lechavero, that you get angry or you have negative feelings towards another person, and that causes you to do something bad. The Netziv then says that the three major sins which I mentioned all are the three paradigmatic bad sins for each of those categories. What does he mean? That the paradigmatic sin of a lack of faith in God is avodah zarah, is worshiping a foreign god. And the paradigmatic sin wherein your inclinations for sex or for comfort in some way, the paradigmatic sin there is gilui arayos, is improper sexual relationships. And the paradigmatic sin of a bad character trait, feeling something bad for another person, is shfichut damim, is murder. You don't like someone, you kill them. Those are the major categories. And he says that every other sin, other than those three, fits one of those major categories. Interestingly, this is a little tangential, he says that breaking Shabbat can be a violation of one of two of those categories. If you break Shabbat for a want of money, so that, he says, is about a lack of faith in God. But if you break Shabbat for want of bodily desire, he says that fits into the category, interestingly, of Gilui Arayos, which is a bit of a chidush, a bit of an innovation on the part of the Netziv here. But back to our idea, he says, Ha'osem mishkalot sheker, if you do bad business practices and use faulty weights and measurements, eino mederech hata'ava, that's not because your bodily, physically inclinations got the better of you. Ella chisaron emunah behashem. That is actually a fault in your belief and faith in God. How so? Because you're displaying that you think your parnasa, your sustenance in the world, has to come through your own sleight of hand and trickery. You don't have enough faith in God to say that if you use proper weights and measures, if you have good ethical business dealings, God will make sure that you have enough money to put food on the table for you and your family. So he says that falls into the same category as avodah zarah. It's ultimately it's like worshiping a foreign god, because it belies a lack of faith in God. So he says that it's avodah zarah, v'adayin rachok mirosh hakfira. It's true, it's not like avodah zarah itself. Mikol makom hu chamor migilui arayos shehu rosh paraos hata'eva. It's more stringent than the improper sexual dealings, because it's in the category of avodah zarah, which he claims is the worst of the three categories he set up. This is a very interesting idea by the Netziv, that of the three categories, lack of faith in God, or being overwhelmed by your own physical desires, or having bad character traits and acting out against someone else, that though even a low level within lack of faith, namely here using faulty weights, is still worse than what might be a more problematic action within the category of your Yetzer Hara, your inclination overwhelming you. This is just the Netziv's own structure that he's setting up here, very innovative. So he says this, he uses this then to answer, why is this written here next to the Parsha of Amalek? Just like in Exodus. What happens in Exodus? The Israelites ask, Ha yesh Hashem b'kirbeno im ayin, is God amongst us or not? They have a moment of lack of faith in God, and Amalek comes. So too here in Deuteronomy, in the reminiscence of Amalek, which we read the Shabbat, there's a discussion of faulty weights and measurements, which the Netziv claims is also about a failure in belief in God, heder emunah b'Hashem u'v'torato, a lacking, a hiddenness of faith, and that too is connected to Amalek coming, because this too is an example of avodah zarah. It takes place in the realm of lack of faith. So a very interesting idea here from the Netziv that is worth our thinking about this week, the week of Shabbat Zachor. Have a great week. Good learning with you as always, and we will see you next week.